Welcome to a deep dive into the world of GeorgeARomero.
Oh, yeah.
Today, we're taking a look at his iconic zombie films. And, it's more than just brain-eating ghouls.
Right.
We're going to unpack how his work through different decades reflects and even critiques the anxieties of those times.
Yeah.
We'll be drawing on articles, wiki entries, all sorts of stuff to give you the full picture.
Yeah.
From exploding heads to what that mall in Dawn of the Dead really means. Get ready to see zombies like you never have before.
What's fascinating is how Romero uses the zombie genre to explore these really deep social themes.
Right.
It's not just about the scares.
Yeah.
It's about holding a mirror up to ourselves, to our own flaws and anxieties.
Yeah.
And that's why his films resonate so strongly even decades later.
Absolutely. And to kick things off, let's go back to where it all began.
Yeah?
Night of the Living Dead from 1960.
Welcome to a night of total terror. Night of the Living Dead.
Now, you've probably seen The Farmhouse of the Trapped Survivors, but
Yeah.
what really struck me was how Romero uses this documentary-style approach, almost like we're watching a news report of the apocalypse unfolding.
That style really brings you into the thick of it, doesn't it?
Oh,
It heightens the realism, making the horror feel that much closer to home. And considering this was released during a time of intense social and political upheaval in America, the Vietnam War civil rights movement, that raw, almost newsreel style punches even harder.
It does.
Yeah.
And then there's that ending, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's not your typical Hollywood happy ending, to say the least.
Tragic, almost matter of fact.
Yeah.
And when you consider Dwayne Jones, a black actor, as the lead in 1968,
Wow.
it adds a whole other layer to the film's commentary on race relations.
Right.
Some argue that Ben's fate at the hands of the posse isn't just about mistaken identity during a zombie outbreak,
Yeah.
but it reflects a much deeper systemic issue.
Wow. Yeah. You can't watch that ending the same way after realizing that, can you?
No, you can't.
It's like the zombies are almost a secondary threat compared to the prejudice baked into society itself.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Romero was brilliant at using the fantastical to expose the very real issues we often try to ignore.
Right. And this social critique continues in his next major film, Dawn of the Dead.
Okay.
Now we're in 1978,
All right.
and instead of a farmhouse, the survivors find themselves holed up in a shopping mall.
Okay, the mall thing, I've heard so many interpretations.
Oh, yeah?
But what's Romero really getting at here?
Well, think about it. In the 70s, consumerism was booming. Malls were these cathedrals of stuff promising happiness through buying. But in Romero's vision, they become these spaces of mindless consumption, mirroring the zombies themselves.
Yeah.
You see shoppers frantically grabbing items, their movements almost mimicking the zombies.
Right.
It's satire at its finest.
It's almost like the mall becomes a metaphor for how we can become zombified by our own desires, just blindly consuming without thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes Dawn of the Dead so disturbing. It's not just about surviving the undead. It's about recognizing the deadening aspects of our own culture.
Right.
And just to make things even more interesting, we have two distinct versions of this film.
Romero's and Dario Argento's, each reflecting their artistic visions.
Wait, two versions?
Yeah.
So what's the difference?
Argento, the Italian filmmaker, was actually a co-financier and secured international distribution rights.
Okay.
His cut features a more action-oriented approach with a rock soundtrack by Goblin, while Romero's has a slower burn,
Right.
using stock music and emphasizing that social critique we talked about.
So it's not just watching two slightly different edits. It's almost like experiencing two different moods for the same story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And let's not forget the impact of Tom Savini's special effects in Dawn of the Dead.
Okay.
Those exploding heads, the fluorescent blood.
Oh, yeah.
It was groundbreaking and added a whole other layer to the film's visual style.
Those visuals were so iconic.
Absolutely.
I'd heard Savini used real shotguns for those headshots. Is that true?
Well, not quite.
Okay.
It involved food scraps and shotgun blasts.
Yeah.
But aimed at a cast of the actor's head for safety.
Right.
Savini was known for pushing boundaries while keeping it practical. And Romero actually loved that over-the-top gore.
Yeah.
Said it gave the film a comic book feel, further heightening that satirical edge.
It's like they were taking something horrifying and making it almost absurd, further commenting on how ridiculous our societal obsessions can be.
Exactly.
Right.
And speaking of things not going to plan, Dawn of the Dead almost had a completely different ending.
Oh.
Much darker, with suicide being a major theme.
Wow.
Thankfully, they changed course.
Yeah.
But it shows how much thought Romero put into exploring the psychological toll of this world.
Yeah. And just to add another layer of complexity, Dawn of the Dead has gone through countless home media releases, culminating in that massive Ultimate Edition DVD set.
Oh, absolutely.
For the serious fans, it's like a treasure trove of behind-the-scenes stuff.
You get all the different cuts, documentaries, commentaries. It's a deep dive in itself.
Yeah.
But now let's move on to 1985 and Day of the Dead.
Okay.
This one takes us underground into a bunker where scientists are trying to understand the zombies. It's a different feel, much more claustrophobic and, well, bleak.
Bleak is right.
Yeah.
The mall was almost satirical, but here it feels like hope itself is dwindling.
Yeah.
And yet, amidst all that, we get Bub, this zombie who shows signs of intelligence, even emotion.
Right.
It's almost like Romero's saying, hey, even the monsters might have more to them than we think.
Bub is truly fascinating.
Yeah.
He's the product of scientific experimentation.
Right.
But he starts responding to music, even saluting a military figure.
Wow.
It challenges the audience to question what it means to be human, or rather undead.
Yeah. And while Bub offers a glimmer of hope, the overall tone of Day of the Dead is undeniably dark.
Right.
This is partly due to the production challenges Romero faced.
Oh.
He had to scale back his vision due to budget constraints and rating concerns.
Oh, wow.
Imagine Romero's original idea was to create the Gone with the Wind of zombie films.
Wow.
A zombie epic on that scale.
Oh, yeah.
Now that's something I'd love to see.
I know.
But even with limitations, Day of the Dead remains a potent entry in his work.
Absolutely.
And the special effects, again, by Savini reach a whole new level of detail and, well, gross out factor.
Right. It was like a training ground for some of the biggest names in the special effects world, Greg Nicotero included, who went on to do incredible work on The Walking Dead.
Right.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's stick with Romero's evolution.
Yeah.
We've seen the rise of the dead, the fall of society. Now comes the question.
Okay.
What if the zombies themselves evolve?
All right.
That's where Land of the Dead comes in, released in 2005.
And this is where the zombies aren't just mindless shufflers anymore, right?
Right.
They're organizing, using tools, almost becoming a society themselves.
Exactly.
It's scary, but also makes you think, are they the real monsters here, or is it still us?
That's the brilliance of Land of the Dead.
Right?
The line between monster and human becomes increasingly blurry. And with the introduction of Big Daddy, this intelligent zombie leader, Romero, pushes that commentary on class division even further.
Right.
He's not just a big, scary zombie. He represents the oppressed rising up against their exploiters.
It's like Romero saying, look, the real horror isn't The Walking Dead. It's the systems we create that dehumanize and exploit others. Whether it's racial prejudice, consumerism, or class warfare, these things are turning us into the monsters.
Right.
Yeah.
And by having the zombies evolve, Romero throws the whole concept of humanity into question.
Right.
Who are the real monsters here?
Yeah.
Who deserves our empathy?
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable, thought-provoking stuff.
It is.
And while we can dive deeper into Land of the Dead, I think it's time we address the rest of Romero's work.
Okay.
He didn't stop with this film, right?
No!
There's more to uncover.
Yeah.
There is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the big thematic ideas in Romero's films, but I'm also fascinated by the smaller details, the behind-the-scenes stuff. Like that iconic mall in Dawn of the Dead, it wasn't just some random location, right?
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Romero actually got the idea while visiting the Monroeville Mall in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
A friend of his was managing the place, and during a visit,
Yeah.
inspiration struck.
Wow.
Talk about finding the perfect set for your zombie apocalypse movie.
That's amazing.
Right.
It's like the mall itself was destined to become a zombie haven.
It was.
But the mall wasn't the only real-life location used, was it?
Nope.
No.
The airfield scenes, where our survivors find a temporary escape,
Right.
were shot at the Harold W. Brown Memorial Airfield, also in Monroeville.
Okay.
It's still operational today.
Wow.
Can you imagine landing there?
Oh, yeah.
Knowing it was once a refuge from the undead?
Totally.
Gives me chills just thinking about it.
And what about that scene in the gun store?
Okay.
That felt so authentic with all the different weapons.
They actually filmed that at a real gun shop in Pittsburgh called Firearms Unlimited.
Okay.
Sadly, the shop has closed down since then.
Oh,
But I bet it had some wild stories to tell,
I can only imagine.
especially after being featured in a Romero film.
Speaking of stories, those practical effects in Dawn of the Dead, like that biker gang scene, How did they even pull that off?
That's pure Tom Savini magic.
Yeah.
For those exploding heads.
Right.
They used a cast of the actor's head.
Okay.
Filled with food scraps.
Yeah.
And then blasted it with a real shotgun.
Wow.
It's gruesome, sure.
Yeah.
But it's a testament to Savini's commitment to making things look as real as possible.
I always wondered how they did that.
Yeah.
It's disturbing, but in a way, it's almost artistic how they managed to create something so believable with practical effects.
Right. And it plays into Romero's style perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about hiding the gore or making it cartoonish.
No.
It's about that in-your-face realism that makes the horror so visceral.
Right.
Speaking of realism, let's rewind a bit to Night of the Living Dead and that ending.
Okay.
The posse mistaking Ben for a zombie. Yeah. It's just gut-wrenching.
It's one of the most powerful endings in horror film history.
Yeah.
And to think Dwayne Jones was cast simply because he was the best actor for the role.
Right.
But back then, in 1968, seeing a black man as the hero, it was revolutionary. And then to have him die like that, it's a commentary on race that still feels relevant today.
It's a chilling reminder of how prejudice can be as deadly as any zombie horde.
Right.
And Romero wasn't afraid to show that, to make us confront the uncomfortable truths about our society.
Yeah.
And then there's Day of the Dead with those incredible and often disgusting special effects.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't that where Greg Nicotero, the mastermind behind the Walking Dead's effects, got his start?
You're right.
And
he was part of Savini's team on that film.
Right.
I read somewhere that Nicotero called it zombie boot camp.
Wow.
It's amazing to see how those connections run through the history of horror.
It's like a lineage of talented artists,
Yeah.
all building on the work of those who came before.
What?
And speaking of connections, we can't forget that Romero's own daughter, Laurie Cardiel, starred in Day of the Dead.
Oh, wow.
She played Dr. Sarah Bowman, one of the few characters who kept her sanity in that underground bunker.
It's always cool to see those family ties woven into a filmmaker's work.
Yeah.
And it speaks to Romero's trust in her as an actress to give her such a crucial role in that intense film.
Right.
But, you know, one thing that often gets overlooked in Romero's films is the music.
Oh, yeah.
It always seems to fit so perfectly, adding another layer to the atmosphere.
Oh, the music is absolutely crucial to Romero's style.
Yeah.
He used a mix of stock music and original scores, and each choice was deliberate.
Okay.
For example, in Dawn of the Dead,
Yeah.
the Italian version has a progressive rock soundtrack by Goblin,
Right.
which gives it a totally different feel compared to the orchestral music used in Romero's cut.
That's right. It's almost like listening to two different soundtracks for the same story.
It is.
But I'm curious, did he use any iconic scores or composers in his other films?
Well, not in the same way as Goblin.
Okay.
Romero often leaned towards creating unique soundscapes rather than using well-known pieces.
Right.
He wanted the music to reflect the mood and themes of each film,
Yeah.
building tension, creating dread, or even offering moments of dark humor.
Right.
It's a subtle element, but is part of what makes his films so effective.
It's all about the details, isn't it?
It is.
And speaking of details, Land of the Dead, with its evolved zombies, also had some fun cameos.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright, the guys behind Shaun of the Dead, appear in that one?
They did.
They did.
They pop up as photo booth zombies.
Wow.
A nice little nod to their own zombie comedy,
Right.
which was clearly inspired by Romero's work.
Yeah.
It's like a circle of zombie love,
Right.
passing the torch from one generation of filmmakers to the next.
And let's not forget Tom Savini's cameo in Land of the Dead.
Oh, yeah.
He's not doing the special effects this time.
Right.
He's actually playing Blades the Machete zombie. Of course, Savini wouldn't miss a chance to be part of a Romero zombie film.
Oh, never.
It's almost like a tradition at this point.
It is.
But let's shift gears a bit and talk about those later films.
Okay.
Diary of the Dead and Survival of the Dead.
Right.
They might not be as popular as the earlier ones.
Right.
But they still feel important to Romero's overall message.
I agree.
Yeah.
Diary of the Dead was Romero's commentary on the rise of social media
Okay.
and how it shapes our perception of reality.
Um.
It's told through the lens of a group of film students documenting the zombie outbreak.
Right.
And it feels eerily relevant today with our constant reliance on smartphones and the internet.
It's like Romero foresaw how technology would become such a dominant force in our lives.
Absolutely.
Even during an apocalypse.
Yeah.
And Survival of the Dead, that one was all about human conflict.
Right.
Even in the face of extinction.
Yes.
Two families feuding over how to deal with the zombies.
Right.
Some wanting to kill them, others believing they can be domesticated. Yeah.
It's a bleak look at how our own divisions can be our downfall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Survival of the Dead shows that even when faced with a common enemy, we humans can't seem to put aside our differences.
Right.
It's a bleak but powerful message about the dangers of our own nature.
It's almost like Romero's saying, hey, the zombies are scary, but look at yourselves, humans.
Right.
You might be the bigger threat in the long run.
Absolutely.
But Romero didn't just stick to films, right?
Nope.
He explored his zombie universe in comics and even a novel.
That's right.
Okay, so tell me about the comics.
Well, he wrote a comic book series for DC Comics called Toe Tags, featuring George Romero,
Okay.
which was actually adapted from one of his unused screenplays.
Oh, wow.
It's a great read for anyone who wants to delve deeper into his creative process
Yeah.
and see how he developed his ideas.
And then there's Empire of the Dead, his comic series for Marvel, which was really ambitious.
Absolutely.
He brought zombies and vampires together in a battle for New York City. Talk about a monster mashup. It's like he was saying, hey, I can create a whole universe of horror, not just limited to zombies.
Right, and it seems like that was something he wanted to explore more in the later part of his career.
Yeah.
But let's not forget The Living Dead, the novel he co-wrote with Daniel Kraus.
Oh, wait.
It came out posthumously.
Right.
And it's a sprawling epic that delves into the origins and evolution of the zombie outbreak in incredible detail.
It does.
I've heard it's a must-read for any Romero fan.
Oh, absolutely.
It's packed with all the gore, suspense, and social commentary we've come to expect from him.
It really is.
Yeah.
It expands on his film universe, filling in gaps and answering questions that the movies couldn't address.
Right.
It's like a final gift from Romero to his fans, a chance to immerse themselves even further in his world.
And speaking of his world, one thing that always strikes me is how Romero's zombies evolved over time.
Oh, yeah?
They started as these slow, lumbering creatures in Night of the Living Dead.
Right.
And by the time we get to Land of the Dead, they're organized using tools, even showing signs of intelligence.
Absolutely.
It's like they're reflecting our own evolution as a species, both the good and the bad.
It's like he's saying the zombies are a reflection of us.
Yeah.
And the scariest thing is that we're the ones who are evolving.
Right.
For better or worse.
But before we get too philosophical, there's one more aspect of Romero's work I want to touch on.
Okay.
The impact of Night of the Living Dead on the horror genre as a whole.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That film wasn't just groundbreaking for its content,
Right.
but for its style and approach.
Absolutely.
It had this gritty, realistic feel that was a huge departure from the more campy horror films that were popular at the time.
Yeah.
That documentary style, the unflinching violence, it felt real, immediate, and incredibly unsettling.
It did.
And it wasn't afraid to address social issues,
Right.
which was pretty rare for a horror film back then.
It did.
It made audiences think,
Yeah.
question their assumptions about society and human nature.
Right.
That blend of horror realism and social commentary, it became Romero's signature. And it influenced countless filmmakers who came after him.
Oh, for sure.
It's amazing to think that a low-budget, independent film from 1968 could have such a lasting impact on cinema.
It really is.
Yeah.
Night of the Living Dead proved that horror could be more than just cheap thrills.
Right.
It could be art. It could be a form of social critique.
Yeah.
And it could hold a mirror up to our own darkest fears and desires.
And that's a legacy that continues to resonate today, even decades later.
It does.
But I think we've covered quite a bit of ground in this deep dive, and it's time for us to take a short break.
Okay.
When we come back, we'll wrap things up with some final thoughts on the enduring legacy of George A. Romero and his unforgettable zombie films. We've journeyed through exploding heads, decaying malls, and even zombies with a bit of personality.
It's in quite a ride.
But as we wrap up this deep dive into George A. Romero, what stands out to you as his most significant contribution?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Was it the gore, the social commentary, or something else entirely?
Yeah, it's hard to pick just one thing, but for me, it's how Romero shattered conventions with Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
Remember, this was 1968,
Right.
a time of massive social shifts.
Right.
To release a film with such graphic violence, a bleak ending, and a black lead during the Civil Rights era was truly groundbreaking.
It's easy to forget how bold that was for the time, and it went beyond just the content, right?
Absolutely.
The film's independent production was a game changer, showing that impactful stories didn't need a Hollywood studio backing them.
Exactly. Night of the Living Dead paved the way for a whole generation of independent filmmakers. It's a testament to Romero's vision that a film initially met with controversy and censorship is now a recognized classic, preserved in the Library of Congress, no less.
Wow.
It proves how art can challenge the status quo and shift our perspectives.
And that's not even mentioning the social critiques woven into each film, from consumerism in Dawn of the Dead to the military-industrial complex in Day of the Dead. Romero always had something to say, even amidst the zombie mayhem.
His work goes beyond mere entertainment.
Right.
It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves.
Yeah.
Our fears, prejudices, and capacity for both good and evil.
Yeah.
It's horror with a purpose, prompting us to think critically and challenge the world around us.
It's like he's saying, hey, those zombies are a symptom, not the disease.
Right.
Look closer at yourselves, at what's turning us into monsters.
Exactly. His films are a wake-up call disguised as zombie horror.
Yeah.
Reminding us that the most terrifying monsters might not be on screen, but reflected in our own actions and societal structures.
So as we reach the end of our deep dive, what's the lasting legacy of George A. Romero?
On one hand, he's undeniably the godfather of the modern zombie film.
Yeah.
He created a blueprint followed by countless filmmakers, from indie darlings to blockbuster behemoths. But more importantly, he elevated the horror genre, proving it could be artistic, insightful, and a powerful tool for exploring the complexities of human nature.
And it seems his work resonates even more strongly today.
Oh, absolutely.
We face so many challenges: climate change, social unrest, political divides.
Yeah.
It's no wonder stories about survival, resilience, and holding on to humanity in the face of chaos appeal to us.
Romero's films offer a cathartic escape from these anxieties, but also a framework for understanding them.
Yeah.
They suggest that even in darkness, there's hope, potential for redemption, and the chance for connection amidst chaos.
That's a powerful message to take away from this deep dive. But one question lingers for me, and maybe for our listeners too.
Okay.
Romero's zombies rose from a mysterious radiation driven by a primal hunger. But what if the real threat isn't external, some cosmic event or scientific mishap? What if the real danger lies within us?
Oh.
Something lurking beneath the surface, fueled by our apathy, greed, and willingness to turn on each other?
Right.
What if we are the ones creating the monsters, the real zombies, through our actions and inactions? That's a thought to chew on, isn't it?
It certainly is. It speaks to the enduring power of Romero's work, how it sparks profound questions and a desire to look deeper both within ourselves and the world around us.
Thank you for joining us on this journey into George A. Romero's haunting and thought-provoking world. We hope you'll continue to explore his films, comics, and novels, finding new layers of meaning with each encounter. Until next time, stay curious, keep questioning, and remember, the best zombie stories often reveal more about humanity than about the undead.